Line from SportsIllustrated.com, AthlonSports.com, YahooSports.com. Dustin Long joins us. Hey, Dustin, how you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good, except I got this real eczema problem going on with me today. But other than that, welcome to our Halloween edition of On Pit Row. Question is, what are you dressed up as?
Well, actually, I'm just dressed up as a regular old sports writer, so I'm just sitting at a restaurant finishing up a story for USA Today for tomorrow. So no trick-or-treating for me just yet.
All right. Well, see, I forgot that one. So
it's all right. Steve's doing enough for both of you.
I'm doing most of the tricking and not a lot of treating. So your headline for SportsIllustrated.com: Keselowski, the only thing standing in the way of Johnson's 6th title. Charlie and I talked as well earlier on in the show about the fact that we think it's pretty much down to a two-man race. And the question that we had was, is it better to be the hunted or the hunter in this deal as we go into 3 to go? What's your feelings?
Well, I mean, Jimmie Johnson's been both. I mean, he's come from behind to win the championship. He was in second at this point in 06 and 07 and came and won the championship. His last 3 years he won the championship. He was leading with three races to go. So it works either way for him. For Brad Keselowski, I don't think it matters where he is. And, I think that, he's enjoying the situation, but I think he also understands what's at stake and certainly putting forth the effort there and knows anything can happen. You go back to 2010 when Johnson won his last championship. Like you said, he led with 3 races to go, but then lost the lead at Texas to Denny Hamlin when Denny Hamlin won that race, but then rebounded and took the points and rebounded and didn't lose as many points to Hamlin at Phoenix, and then finished Hamlin at Homestead to win the championship. So still plenty of time. It's quite an interesting chase, and we'll see if Brad is the guy that can dethrone Jimmie Johnson.
Does Brad have the mental toughness to be able to do this? Everybody, the old adage about you have to lose one before you can win one. Can Keselowski win one without having to have lost one?
I mean, I think he can. I think people are overlooking Brad because he's young and and to them maybe he hasn't been tested. I mean, he's won a nationwide title, although that's something different than this for sure. But I think back to last season, and he was third in the points going into the Martinsville race last fall. Was running 6th in the last few laps. Got spun in a chain reaction incident. NASCAR didn't throw a caution. So Brad lost all those positions, ended up gaining a couple spots, but lost like 10 spots, essentially 10 points. That dropped him to 4th in the points. It forced Brad and Paul Wolfe to be more aggressive in making some calls at decisions. Those backfired, and he really wasn't relevant in the chase again. But, he was in it for 7 races. And in talking with Jeff Gordon the other day, I mean, Jeff said, look, he's gained that experience from that chase. And even Jeff says, look, he says there's pressure on everybody in the chase, but he says, Brad is not the guy that really looks like he's going to crack under that pressure.
Well, speaking of cracking under pressure, Steve's second Fast Lap question this week was, he asked me what did I think about Denny Hamlin suggesting that his pit road speeding penalties weren't legit. How did you take that, Dustin? And is that a sign that Hamlin cracked?
Well, I mean, I don't, whether they're legit or not, they're legit because that's what NASCAR called, and that's what NASCAR said. So,
exactly.
I mean, from that sense, it's legit. But, I talked with Darian Grubb after the race, and he says, look, that's something we've got to go back and look at. He said he took full responsibility for their issues, with the pit road speeding penalties. And whether they just overlooked they didn't overlook the line, but I mean, obviously he kind of just thought that the boxes are so short, it was just so easy to just kind of get caught speeding. But again, you've got to measure what your tack reading is and be able to give your driver the right reading and everything like that. And it goes back to setting the car up and what you put into the car. So, Darian accepted responsibility for it. They'll have to go back, and I'm sure they already have looked at it, what caused the problem, and try to prevent it from happening again. I mean, Jimmie Johnson's got busted for speeding there in the past too. So it's easy to do with that 30-mile-per-hour speed limit at Martinsville.
As we go to these next 3 racetracks, is there some place where you can look at these three and say, if Keselowski is going to win, if Johnson's going to win, it's going to be at one of these three racetracks, or do they have to all run good at all three of them for one of them to win the title?
Well, I think the key is going to be Phoenix in a couple of weeks. I mean, I think if you look at of the last three races, Texas, Phoenix, and Homestead, Texas and Homestead, mile-and-a-half tracks, you almost kind of figure Keselowski and Johnson are going to essentially break even at those tracks. They're both pretty good on the mile-and-a-halves, and those kind of fit into to the strengths of their teams. I think the key is what happens at Phoenix. Johnson's certainly been very strong there in the past. Keselowski match that, because if Brad can't, let's say Brad's going to lose 6 to 8 points at Phoenix, then I don't foresee him making up 6 to 8 points on Johnson at Texas or Homestead. If nothing happens to Johnson, I just don't think he outruns Johnson by 6 or 8 spots at either of those two tracks. So I think it comes down to Phoenix, and like I said, I think they break even to some degree with at Texas and Homestead, and it's just who runs better, who finishes better at Phoenix could be truly the champion.
I'm going to switch gears just a little bit on you, Dustin, and that is let's talk about crew chiefs a little bit. Another couple of crew chief changes coming up this week in what's kind of been a silly season deal. Drew Blickensdorfer, who we're going to have on the show next week, will become Marcus Ambrose's crew chief, and Mike Ford finds himself on the outside looking in again. Talk to me about both of those changes and whether you think that they're going to make a big difference in either one of the cases as far as going forward.
Well, I think what Richard Petty Motorsports is looking for out of Drew with him joining Ambrose is that, obviously it didn't work at Childress this year, but again, you can't with Jeff Bernstein, but you can't put all that on Drew. I mean, you look at Childress's operation, and yes, Harvick made the Chase, but he hasn't done much in the Chase. The other two cars have not been strong. This has been a down year for Childress. There's no doubt about it. So I don't think you can put that all on the blame on Drew on Jeff Burton's woes this season. But you have to remember, before he went over to Childress, he was over at Roush for a number of years. So he's got that experience on the Ford side. Richard Petty Motorsports with Ford. They work closely with Roush, so it just kind of tightens the bonds between those two organizations. As for Mike Ford, I mean, it's certainly another fall from grace. I mean, you think about it, 2 years ago with Denny Hamlin, they nearly won the championship. They don't win the championship. They end up making, they get through last season, and it's not the way that, Denny wants it, and they struggle, don't have the performance they expect, so they make a change. And Mike misses a good part of the season, comes back to Richard Petty Motorsports, was with Almirello, then they switched crew chiefs between Eric and Marcos, and now he's out of a job at this point. So I think there's some talk he may end up with a lower rung team, but again, you got to think about it. I mean, here's a guy just 2 years ago nearly won the championship.
Dustin, we're coming up to a break. I know you've got stuff you're working on. Can you hang on for a couple of minutes so we can talk a little bit more, or you got to go?
I got a couple more minutes, and then I've got to go.
All right. I'll tell you what. Let's we'll just delay this break just a little bit, because I wanted to ask you, and then we'll let you go. I wanted to ask you about what one of our Fast Lap questions was, and that was kind of about whether or not, again, you'd be better off taking a nationwide full-time gig at Gibbs, much like rumor has it that Brian Vickers has been offered, or are you better off kind of hanging around Michael Waltrip Racing with a very part-time cup ride? What's the better deal for Brian Vickers or anybody else in that situation?
Well, I think for Brian, I think the best deal is going to be what it looks like is going to happen. Obviously, the 9 races with Waltrip's team driving the 55 car, and then what's expected to be a full-time nationwide effort at Joe Gibbs Racing. It's about getting in the car, being in the car every week. I mean, I know he talked about the other day at Martinsville, he's been in a car several weeks this year. Obviously, different types of cars, road racing cars, stock cars, and some other things. But if he wants to make his career in NASCAR, it's important to be in the car every week. And certainly, and when he's at Gibbs in a nationwide car, that's the team that can win the championship. And it's just like what we're seeing with Elliott Sadler. He went down to the Nationwide Series to try to revive his career. Now he's battling for the championship over at Children. Maybe it leads to a cup opportunity, or maybe it just leads to being with a strong nationwide team for the rest of his career. And for Elliott, you know, he said a few years ago it was about winning races and being competitive. Well, he's in that situation. I think Brian would take the same situation. It's about wanting to win, wanting to be in competitive equipment. So I think, you know, I think any driver, you just need to be in the car as much as possible. And with Brian, and like I said, it looks like he's going to have this opportunity. Joe gets racing in the Nationwide Series. I mean, that's just a fantastic opportunity in that series. So, I mean, it's such a strong organization, and look at the success they've had. Look at all the races Joey Logano's won for them this year. So, you know, I think he's got the best of both worlds in a way, and maybe sets him up for, you know, 2014 season if Mark Martin doesn't want to run as many races or something like that. That may open up a full-time opportunity for Vickers at Michael Waltrip Racing. I mean, and you got to look at it. Look, Waltrip's cars put two of its cars in the Chase. Childress and Gibbs only put one of its cars in the Chase. Stewart-Haas Racing only put one of its cars in the Chase. So, you know, getting that experience with Gibbs and keeping your foot in the door at Michael Waltrip Racing, that's not a bad thing right now.
All right, as we let you go, Dustin, we got 3 weeks to go. Do you have a gut feeling who's going to win this thing?
Well, you know, I was talking with Martin Truex Jr. earlier today and asked him, you know, who he thought, and he says, look, it's hard to go against the 48 because they just don't make mistakes, and I think you have to go in that direction. But I really want to see what Brad Keselowski and his team can do this week, because they've had 2 tough weeks, and he said a couple weeks ago that Kansas and Martinsville were going to be really their tough two tracks. They got through that. Can they get it turned around and have that success at Texas they've had at some of the other mile and a half? So it's hard to go against the 48 with Johnson, but you know, at some point somebody's going to beat him, and I wouldn't be surprised if Keselowski did it.
All right, thanks so much, Dustin. We appreciate you spending some time with us. We'll talk to you again, man.
All right, thanks.
All right, that is Dustin Long, and you can read his stuff in a variety of different places, as we alluded to. Sports Illustrated.